Um, well, friends in the crowd, we all work with dual careers. I used to swim, where are you? Miroslav. I used to swim with Miroslav a long time ago at the Olympics, at the European Youth Championships, at the World Championships, at the European Championships. And we just had to combine school and swimming, and we didn't know what we do, did we? So it's a giant step forwards, what we made the last 30 years. First of all, before I go into the details, there was a little article on the front page of our newspaper, national newspaper this morning, which actually might be a small step for sport, but it's a giant leap for dual careers in the Netherlands. The government and the Olympic Committee decided that when an athlete, an elite athlete, is out of shape or is not selected in the national team, he still can fall back on unemployment benefits. So we are about to recognize elite athletes as being a profession, and when we're talking about a profession, it will put dual career in a totally different aspect than it has been the last years. So it's actually a very important step we took as the Netherlands. Acknowledging elite athletes as professionals and treating them as a profession. Let me see. I will take you through the research we did the last 10 months. It was quite a difficult task because I'll come back to that. There are huge differences within Europe, and it's hard to get to the results. We're working on the report at this moment together with Agatha on the final version of the report. I'll go through it with you as far as possible on details and in general. For this study, we used the definition of dual careers, a successful combination of education, training or work with sport to enable an individual to reach her or his full potential in life. For this, we talked with athletes, sport associations, professionals, education and educational institutions, labor market representatives and policy makers. The study was not only done by the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, but we did have, let me see, also TES involved, EAS involved, Birch Consultants who did a lot of the writing, the Free University of Brussels. They were all partners, and later on Guy and Paul will speak or be part of the discussion as well. So our expertise is not coming from us solely, it's coming from a whole group of, well, institutions who work in the field for a long time already. And we do appreciate all the things they added to our project and our report, because they were very important for us and for the final result. What was asked of us? The objective of the project was to develop a set of minimal requirements, as the minister spoke about, at EU level, which could function as a reference point for national dual career services and facilities. Secondly, they wanted us to provide a model of a quality framework providing transparency and guarantees on quality, safety, security for athletes, taking into account a quality label and or accreditation system for facilities and dual career services at national and EU levels. Chew on this one. It's a hard one to get all the information on the table and to write it into a report which fits the wishes of the EU. And to help us in Europe further on the dual careers path. As I said, it is being finalized right now, but I think at the end of next month we will have the report and you can read about it. What kind of output can you expect in the report? We have deliverables in 4 areas. First one is we give a systematic overview per country. We made country profiles, so all of the 28 member states were asked, and I'll come to that a little later, on dual careers, and we had facts and figures as a starter for the research. Secondly, we were working on minimal requirements in services and facilities. We try to put that in a checklist which you can use if you are planning to start or are you working in dual career services for your athletes and your students. Third, we made a quality framework, like the minister said, on dual career systems. What is the quality needed to have a good system in place? I'll come back to that as well. But when we had all the discussions, can you guys see, we had all the discussions, a lot of topics came up which had not directly related to our study, but were important enough to note and write down in the report. So there are also a lot of recommendations outside our study, which are important enough to share with you in the report. You will find that in the report. What were the key elements in our approach, in our study? The key elements were, it was athlete-centered. We do it for the athletes, and 50% of the research was done with the athletes. So the design focus was on the athletes, and they were centered in our research. What we also had to do is talk to the sport world and take them with us in their integrated responsibility for athletes and scholars at the same time. They're not only responsible for the athletes, but they're responsible for the athletes as a student or for the student as an athlete. And they need to understand that. We also assessed EU dimensions and labor market perspective, especially the last one. The labor market perspective was difficult to get on the table, and you will find that in the report. And we talked to quite some institutions who work on the labor market for athletes. Our study approach was geographically of national, regional, and European level. The career scope was varied from talented junior athlete, senior athlete to post-elite athlete phase, so also after career athletes. And the stakeholder domains we visited were sport, education, and the labor market. And in the Netherlands, we also talked to the Minister of Education to see how she would help us forward. What was the data collection method we used? We sent semi-structured survey to all 28 member states. I'll come back to that later in terms of how many responded from that. We did one-to-one interviews with athletes and experts, over 30. We had focus group discussions on certain topics. I'll get to that also later. And we had consultation with athletes and representatives on the first findings of the report. Besides that, we had a literature review, because since 2000, many articles have been written about dual careers in perspective of sports or education. So we tried as much as possible to get insight in the literature from the last 15 years. TAS and Paul Wieleman were a great help with that. So we could not do that on our own, so we did that collaboratively. The country profiles I talked about. 26 member states responded on our questionnaire, filled it in. Some incomplete, but most of them responded. There were 2 non-responders, Lithuania and Poland. And within the country profiles, you can find the following things. If in the report, there are facts and figures. This is the Netherlands, for example. Facts and figures on how many athletes are there, how many students are there, how many students are studying, to get an impression of the figures we're talking about, not only nationally, but also throughout the European Union. There's a summary, how the country is being organized around dual careers. There are practices and barriers. It's not everywhere on the same way organized, and there are some problems in countries we have to work on, or they said that filling in the survey. And is there a quality control system in place at the moment? As you can see in the Netherlands, there is no official quality assessment system in place, although we had this newspaper article. Then we come to the checklist, the second point of the slide a couple of slides ago. We looked at the dimensions of focus, how are the services and facilities organized, target group, especially the elite phase of a career, which principles do we have around individual national teams, how's the education organized, the facilities, the entourage and stuff around the athletes, and how are the support systems placed or in place. We did this with focus group and expert opinion. The athlete requirements were leading. The country profiles were backing up what we got out of the discussions. And we checked our findings with some established programs. Not every country has an established program. So as ESCADA, INSEP, TAS, CAR, LOZO, the CTO in Amsterdam, and the Olympic committees. This will lead to a checklist, which you will find in the report. The quality framework. This is an important one. We identified 5 stakeholder dimensions: the athlete on top, entourage, stakeholder, national government, European Union. Stakeholders were Olympic Committee, federations, clubs, training centers, education institutions, and labor market. They can be judged on a scale of weak. There's nothing too outstanding. Everything is in place. The national government were asked if they have a strategy, do they have a policy cycle, do they do implementation, or is it just paper? And do they have an evaluation cycle? Most important, the athlete. Is he or her informed about his or her rights? Does he know the responsibilities? Are they empowered to make use of the system? Are there role models in place? And how is the commitment of everyone around the athlete? Is there a consensus? The entourage was added after a workshop in Brussels 2 months ago, where everybody said, hey, listen, you do a good study, but you should include parents, relatives, very important part of a dual career, a successful dual career system. You should include the coaches, and you should include teacher employers. Of course we did, but we also have to talk about the quality of those people. Does the coach know there is a dual career perspective for his athlete? Does the coach know that it's a right of an athlete to be successful in both? And is the coach aware of the fact that he can organize it or can get it organized somewhere in his country? What are the take-home messages after these slides? There are large numbers. We're talking about at least 100,000 athletes in an Olympic cycle who are part of a dual career program. We don't want them to be unemployed after their careers. I was talking to Guy the other day, and he said, oh, half of them is coming from England. We have 50,000 in our system. So it is at least 100,000 athletes who we're talking about, probably much more. We're talking only, Guy, about the elite athletes, not the talented athletes and not the whole group behind that. But 100,000 is, well, what the national standards out of the 28 countries regard as elite. It's in the senior phase, and we're using numbers provided by local contact points. So probably, or most probably, it's an underestimation of the numbers of athletes who are doing dual careers, but might end up unemployed after their careers, a point of attention. Secondly, elite sport today in general claims their sport full potential instead of combined. This is what I meant, that sports still have to accept the fact that they're integral responsible for an athlete, not only, in my case, in the pool, but also at school. The sport has to recognize that both a career in education and a career in the pool are important for athletes in the way we are organizing elite sport at this moment. The sport tend to say, listen, if you want to go to the Olympics, the next 4 and 8 years, you're mine and you do nothing else. This is not the way we can help athletes through a dual career system. There is a variety of systems in place across the European Union. It ranges from non-existent to well-known. TAS, INSEP, CAR, they're all well-known, but in many countries there is none of almost none system existent. There are no standardization or quality frameworks or minimum requirements available in certain countries. There is limited transparency, evaluation and accountability for the dual career system, and numbers and impact of the results are hard to almost impossible to get. We looked for 28 countries and it was hard work to get it all on the table, if there was any. What does our studies show further? The needs of athletes in dual careers can be identified. They can be operationalized and they can be accommodated. A minimum model for dual career facilities and services can be designed, and a quality framework with label potential can also be designed. You will find this in our report, which will come out, well, what I said, end of this year. EU relevance can be found, and the two speakers before me already said that. Within the sport, some EU policies coincide. If we talk about mobility throughout Europe, if we talk about youth, safeguarding youth, if we talk about labor market, education and sports, it all comes together in the dual career discussion. No, you see that, well, mobility of elite athletes, nature of elite sport, legal aspects related, and the protection of minors, which is not unimportant in a dual career system, the protection and the safety of minors who are doing sport. For example, gymnastics. So we have some advices as well. You should implement the assessment tool as we developed through dedicated EU member states, the network we formed with this study. We have contacts in all 28 countries, and we can use this network to implement the assessment tool, and we can use it as a part of a self-regulation strategy per country for the EU and even for athletes themselves. The goals of the system should be, well, I have to do it here, transparency, mobility, safety, and safety for the athlete. There should be a transition in sports toward full potential responsibility, not only sports, but both. Professionalization of coaches, trainers, and governance does need attention in the future. The first step is being made by our assessment tool. The DC network value, the value of a DC network is that we can exchange good practices, we can develop standards together, we can promote systems development, and we can promote integration between countries, which is not the case yet, because we are also competing against each other. Why should a Dutch swimmer go to England if England wants to beat him in the pool? The trainers will help him, but only to this level, not to this level, because that's for the English swimmers. And right so, because we would do the same in the Netherlands. But is that a good attitude if we promote dual careers all across Europe? Expert base supporting all EU countries, NOC's federations should be set up and maintained, and we should close the gap between the labor market and the sport world. The labor market is the one party which is absent pretty much at this moment. We have the Randstads and all those facilities, but that's not dual careers. Dual careers is different. For example, if we have in a dual career, let's stick to the swimmer, who wants to be a doctor, finishes study as a doctor at 24, and goes on for 2 Olympic cycles up to his 30s, until he's 32. 8 years, no training, no professional skills. At the end, when he ends his career at 32, he will not be selected as a doctor because he has no skills anymore, has no experience. What can we in the labor market do to bridge the gap of 8 years between ending his study as a doctor and ending his athletic career? Those 8 years should not be lost, should be used. At the moment, there's nothing. Towards across EU recognizable standards is what we should do. And assessment and support to high performance centers is important because those high performance centers might become the places in the future where dual careers are operated. Well, read this. No, just kidding. I mean, it'll be handed out, I guess. But it's a story about a girl or an athlete, a very good athlete from Ireland who wanted to train in England. And she walks right into all the problems I just shared with you, and for which dual careers should find a solution, I think. Thank you. Any questions? We probably can share. I look to my colleagues in the back. Or can we share this little article from the newspaper? But it's in Dutch, is it? Might be interesting to see how the Netherlands get to this point, which maybe is, well, a giant step forward for the dual career discussion. Sure. Microphone.
You mentioned the problem that if a Luxembourgish or a Netherlands swimmer would go to England, why would they try to make him better than swimmers over there? Do you think Americans have the same attitude, or do you think they are ahead of us?
No, at least the elites, the elite sport system is integrated in the school system, so they don't have the discussion between school and sport because it's part of school. That's first. But and then the school competition in America is very important. So they need to have the best swimmers in their program, and they do not care whether they make the foreigners better, as long as they win the NC2As. Different is, for example, our sprinters, the Dutch sprinters, girl sprinters are very good. They're competing with the Australian girl sprinters, and the national programs don't allow an Australian swimmer to swim with us or a Dutch swimmer to swim in Australia, because they meet up in the pool, not in the competition, not in the training pool. And at national level, it's separated. But when you talk about the school system in America, it has another purpose, namely excelling with your school in a sport program. And they have this well, we talked to that with the athletes. They have this scholarship system, which makes it interesting to go to the United States, because you can, by swimming or doing another sport, earn your education program. So you can do what you like and get paid in your educational way. And we don't have that in Europe, a system like that, at least not in the Netherlands. I don't know, I think many athletes said it would be the solution for their problems, the dual career problems. So in terms of being ahead of us, I think the system is well equipped to help athletes further from a different perspective, but in this terms they are ahead of us, I guess, yeah. They don't have a dual career discussion. No.
Don't know if it's on. Did you look into federation funding structures when you did your study? When I say funding structures, I mean federation gets funding based on the results in the last Olympic cycle.
No, we did not.
You didn't?
No.
Okay.
But why are you asking that?
Because I've noticed during my 13-year sporting career, where I studied law, that the funding structure of federations creates a structural barrier to dual career, because if a federation is funded based on results, the federation does not have an interest in athletes wasting time on education when they could be training. The same with coaches.
I guess that's what we meant, talking about the sports being very much sport-focused instead of dual career-focused.
Yeah.
In the Netherlands, we have a top 10 discussion. That means that only the federations who can help us win or get in the top 10 medal tally at the Olympics are being funded, roughly. That's it. And we have the discussion with them about the position of the student who is an elite athlete. And the coaches, that's what I meant by entourage, have to be educated, because they tend to say, now listen, 8 years, the next 8 years you're mine. And if you want to go to school, it's good, you're out of my program. And that still happens, which is not good. And I don't know whether that is because of the funding, might be, but it's also because the coaches really believe that doing nothing else than your sport will lead to success, instead of creating balanced athletes who do sport at a very high level and do something else. They tend to say, if you're mine, you win the medals.
Yeah, the coach gets to keep his job for 4 years more.
Interesting, though, is we're talking to the EU Athletics. They said that the American system here, a coach is being paid by the educational system. So he is aware of the fact that he has to make champions, but also with good grades. Otherwise, his champion will not swim anymore. So that might be also that we don't employ the coaches through sports, but we employ them through education.
That sounds like a dream.
No, well, athletes have the right to dream. There's no microphone, I guess.
My question is related with what the athletes mentioned before. I think what can help is to change the target contracts of athletes and federations in the European countries, because normally the targeted contracts are just focusing the issue of sport, and so the coaches haven't to be aware of the dual career, of the educational part of the dual career, because they have to focus on the sports, because it's written in their contracts. What do you think, how to change this impact, how to change the way the policy is working with the contract?
Now, what we discussed with the Olympic Committee in the Netherlands is that the contract is for a coach important, but they have written in a contract, you agree on the fact that he has two responsibilities, sport and education. Now it's only sport, so he can kind of hide behind the fact that he has to deliver champions, and the rest is not important. If you combine his if you enlarge his responsibility to the field of education as well, which we promote in the Netherlands, and if you promote it, you have to live up to it, then you could include educational responsibility in his contract as well. And it's not he being solely responsible for the grades. There's a whole system of dual careers behind it in which he can use to help the athlete further. And every moment the athlete has to choose between sports and school and education in terms of an Olympic year or whatever, sports is number one. But still he has a little responsibility for education part of his athletes as well. That would be a first step we are discussing with the Olympic Committee at the moment.
So I think we take the last question, because otherwise we lose track on the time. Jan.
Thank you. How can we, from the EU, influence national policy on education? Because in England, we're finding that sport is becoming of a reduced priority within the education system, less time and less resource being dedicated towards it, which means that the sports very much want to drive dual careers. The institutions are keen to cooperate, but the system of education within the member state means it's increasingly difficult.
I find it very difficult to answer, because this is, well, maybe it's EU politics. And as I think, I just returned from a trip to Japan, which are very eager to learn about dual careers and about sports science and everything that helps them perform good in 2020, is that, well, maybe you can react on it, but that there are moments where all decision makers are together, which you could use to spread the word or to discuss about the responsibilities different ministers have, national policies have, and see whether you can bring it further. And reports like this or studies like this and the ones that Guy are doing and Paul are doing are very important, not only to well, what should I say, to say that it's important, but to show it's important. If we're talking about at least 100,000 athletes who are getting unemployed after their careers, those are impressive numbers, also for Europe. And I think it's 100,000 is, well, Guy, can I say 200? 250? Wow, here you go. No, but just kidding. But those are numbers of athletes we have a responsibility for. Sorry.
Well, as you know, we are in domains where we don't have specific competence at European level. Either in education, in sport, in youth, are domains that are covered by national competencies. So our role, the role at European level, is sharing experience, making this kind of studies, making people aware of this information, sharing information amongst different member states, and in our dialogue structure that we have with the directorate channels, try to influence and put these themes in the agenda based on concrete studies, based on concrete information. Yep. So not only talking by talking, but talking on the basis of some concrete information. And this is the reason why we are doing this kind of studies, and we are having this expert groups in different areas.
But I
Is-
also think that athletes themselves can send a message.
Yeah.
Instead of having others decide over the athletes, have the athletes themselves say that's important that they can, A, combine study and sport, and B, they can train all over Europe under the same circumstances. Which should be, if we're talking about numbers, should be a strong message if they do. But, you know, athletes, well, rather do sport and don't like political games, as they say, very much. But I think they would be a strong force if organized. Thank you very much.